Kia ora and welcome to today's LINKOnline webinar. I'm delighted to introduce Bryan Stevenson and Dean Stronge from our Hamilton office. Bryan leads the Soil Health and Resilience Oneone Ora Tangata Ora research program and will give us a short introduction to the three key areas of focus. Then Dean will outline in more detail the program's wellbeing approach to soil health. This includes social and cultural dimensions and can build a more diverse and integrated knowledge base to better inform policy and practice. I suspect you will have lots of questions. Please put them into the chat box early and we will put as many as we can to the panel. Rest assured, even if we cannot answer today, we will post Q&As to our website in the next week or so. Over to you, Dean.
Bryan.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. Kia ora and welcome. As Christine mentioned, this presentation does stem from our MBIE Endeavour funded program and describes some of the work we've been doing around using a well-being approach to better define soil health. Next slide. So the outline of the talk, I'll give a brief overview and update on the three major research aims of the program. Research aim 1 is around soil resilience. Research aim 2, developing Māori views on soil health. And research aim 3, creating a soil health framework that better integrates science with social and policy needs. But again, the main focus of the talk is around a well-being approach to soil health. Next slide. So what is soil health? We've used the USDA definition of soil health, the continued capacity of the soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. It's a very holistic definition, but it's also very conceptual, and it's hard to put that specific definition in practice. We'll come back to that later in the talk and describe better how that does fit in. Next slide. So research aim 1 is again around soil resilience. And what we're trying to do there is better quantify how different soils and soil functions react to land use and land use change and intensification. We have a number of different projects utilizing long-term experiments and land use comparisons. And we've also have got a lot of collaborators, which I want to acknowledge in different facets of the project. Next slide. A couple of the coordinated sampling campaigns I wanted to highlight was work we've done in conjunction with the SMAP MB program, Plant and Food, and Waikato University. And these are looking at specific land use comparisons on different soil orders in Canterbury, Palick, clay, and brown soils. And that's on dryland sheep and beef, irrigated cropping, and irrigated dairy. And in the Waikato, allophanic, clay, granular, and ultic soils, and that's between maize and pasture. And in these experiments, we're not only trying to see how different soil attributes change, but trying to quantify the interrelationships between, for instance, soil carbon, compaction, soil structure, and soil hydrology. One question we're specifically addressing is the extent to which soil carbon affects soil water holding capacity. And that's actually a question that's pretty hotly debated at the present. Next slide. We also have a range of other outputs to date in the project. And again, these represent different parts that we've invested to look at different aspects of soil health. Next slide. There's also some associated work that is technically not outputs from the project, but again, we're trying to integrate the knowledge from a lot of different areas. Next slide. Research aim 2 is all around developing Māori views of soil health. The inclusion and integration of Maori perspectives on soil health has really been one of the unique aspects of the project, and it's really been a highlight. I won't go into too much detail on this, but Garth Harmsworth has been very active and has given a number of presentations in this area. Next slide. A key output from the book has been the publication of Tamahi Oneone Hua getting tongue-tied, Patakuri, a Maori Soil Sovereignty and Wellbeing Handbook. This was put together by Jessica Hutchings and Joe Smith. Jessica is a collaborator in the project, and quite a number of the chapters in the book were contributed by Maori researchers in the project. The book showcases the depth of Maori knowledge around soils and soil health and the connections Maori have with soil. If you'd like to hear a little bit more, there was a nice review of the book on the Radio New Zealand 9 to Noon show just yesterday, 19th October. So you can go to the Radio NZ website and pull that up. Next slide. So again, Research Aim 3 is around integrating all this information, all these different knowledge forms, including Maori perspectives, with traditional science to develop a more integrated framework for soil health. And so again, what we're trying to do here is integrate the science with the social and the policy needs. And with that, I'll hand it over to Dean.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, so the soil system comprises ecological, social, cultural, economic, institutional, and political dimensions, and all of these dimensions interconnect. So to develop an integrated soil health framework, we need an approach that integrates all of these interconnected dimensions, and we believe that well-being is such an approach. At a recent workshop on soil management, which was held as part of this project, representatives from regional and central government, science organisations, and the agricultural sector identified a need for a value shift in soil due to its fundamental importance to societal well-being. And well-being, as Brian noted above, is integral to Maori perceptions of soil, and it's also a key foundation to the government's roadmap for accelerating the economic potential of the primary sector. Globally, there's been a resurgence of the idea of well-being and policy narratives. As such, well-being is increasingly being viewed as a policy approach to measure social progress and address sustainability issues across nations, sectors, or issues. Through its membership of the Wellbeing Economy Governments, its Living Standards Framework, and its wellbeing budgets, the current New Zealand government has clearly signalled that it wants to embed a wellbeing approach across the public sector and frame, design, and implement public policy with an objective of increasing wellbeing. So reframing soil health as a wellbeing issue complements all of these initiatives. So people and nature are intimately connected, and the human dimensions that shape the way ecosystem services are valued and used are just as critical as the sustainability of soils and the services, and just as critical to the sustainability of soils as the services themselves. So reframing soil health to focus on the well-being benefits that people obtain from nature rather than the ecosystem processes that give rise to them, we think would better inform soil health decision making. Now, this is our current working model. The main purpose of a framework is to provide a structure for thinking in a rigorous way about the matter at hand. And we believe that this framework provides this by integrating soil health and well-being with a strong intervention logic on which to make sound policy and management decisions. So the top part of the framework is adapted from Treasury's Living Standards Framework, and it positions soil health within the wellbeing approach. It aligns the holistic definition of soil health, which recognises that soil is a multifunctional living system with the multidimensional view of well-being. So this part of the framework recognises the interconnectedness and importance of all the capital assets, which is why we need to think of soil health holistically. It recognises the heterogeneity of views people have with regards soil and soil health. It recognises the need to address soil sustainability, i.e. that the capital assets are not eroded by current generations at the expense of future generations. And it recognises the wide variety and variability in soil types and the properties and the qualities, both spatially and temporally, and the importance of a place-based approach. The bottom part of the framework provides a strong intervention logic on which to make policy and management decisions. It draws on Holloway's principles of pest management, and foremost in those is the need to understand the core values. Those core values that people hold with regards soil and soil health. What is it you're trying to protect, or what is it you're trying to promote? An understanding of those benefits, of the benefits people value from soil, who benefits and how, would help develop more equitable soil health policies and support better decision making. Oh, sorry, I've jumped ahead. Second, as part of, in the bottom part of this framework, the second key part of that is the need to understand the threats. What are the threats to that value or benefit that you are trying to establish? Thirdly, is what tools are available to manage the threat, and the tools can include the spectrum from national policy through to on-farm management interventions. And finally, fourth, what monitoring or indicators will be put in place that show the tools are managing that threat, and through that protecting or enhancing that core value or benefit that you're trying to achieve. So human and ecological values have become powerful concepts in environmental management, and the incorporating of these into decision-making processes has become quintessential for achieving environmental outcomes. So the first step in developing soil health policy and management and indicator decisions lies with understanding the range of perspectives and experiences the many diverse actors and stakeholders have in soil and soil health. People will value soil for many different reasons. For some, it will be motivated by economic concerns. For others, it'll be rooted in tradition or emotion. Some will reflect individual needs, while others reflect collective needs and social relations. But for most, it'll be some sort of complex combination of all of these. We've made a significant start through this project in determining what those core values and principles are with respect to Māori and for some sector groups. But further work is required to collate and weight the full range of values that people derive and place on soils to better inform and continue the discussions that has commenced. And this is ongoing work for us. There are synergies and tensions between people's values and perspectives regarding soil and its use. So policy and indicator development is about managing these tensions and the resulting trade-offs. A well-being approach does not eliminate these trade-offs, but it does provide a safe and structured approach for people to engage in meaningful conversations about the issue, to articulate their values, to allow discussion or a translation between the different interest groups and space to facilitate arbitration. And this is why we believe that a well-being approach to soil health would create a more meaningful interpretation of soil and provide a more diverse and integrated knowledge base to better inform soil policy and practice. And that's all we had to say, thanks. And for more information on the project, you can visit our website.
Kia ora, and thanks Dean and Bryan for that. Couple of questions. First of all, Bryan and Dean, maybe Bryan, you could answer this one for us. You said that the program is well underway, there is more work to happen. Can you give us any hints as to what's coming next in the program?
We're really in the integration phase of the project. Most of our field work has been done. As I indicated, we do have some papers written, but we're in the midst of getting several others in the pipeline. But again, right at this point, it's integrating all the information we have and finishing putting that framework together.
That's great. Maybe another webinar next year. Here's a fairly technical question, and I think this one's for you, Bryan, as well. Are you looking at soil drainage practices when you're evaluating microbial attenuation of nutrients and pathogens?
We actually did have a project looking at drainage and how it affected soil chemistry and other aspects of soil. Unfortunately, it looks like that particular project may be a casualty of the COVID shutdown. We were all set to do some sampling before the shutdown, and then of course the timelines got completely screwed up on that. So we may still try to fit it in, but yeah, unfortunately, it's looking like that a project around that may have to be scrapped. I do know, though, there is some thought about future programs in that space.
Fantastic. Now, this one I'm going to point at Dean. In the framework, yes. Why is biodiversity identified as a human value rather than an intrinsic value?
Ooh, that's a good question. I guess it depends on your perspective. I mean, I guess the approach we're taking is that we are putting, it is very much a human-centric approach. The well-being approach is a human-centric approach. So we have got, so I guess that's why we have it there. But as we talked about, I mean, as I mentioned, the framework itself opens up those opportunities to have those discussions. So the fact that that question is raised, to me, is a good one, because that's what the frameworks are meant to be about. So it's to raise those sorts of questions, to have those sorts of discussions, and so that those values can then be considered. So yeah, I mean, I don't have a view either way. It's just that's where we've got it in the framework. And the framework itself, I guess the other point is the framework is an indicator. What's the word? To initiate those discussions. It's not intended to, I guess, address every single point or issue, but it's there to initiate those discussions, and the fact that it raised that question does that for me.
Nice one. Now here's another one. Sorry to pick on you, Dean. Bryan, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to follow on a little bit. We have had some interesting discussions again around, say, a purely ecological view, where again some of those values, such as biodiversity, are more intrinsic. And it's been a really interesting discussion because again, in a Maori point of view, they consider themselves part of nature and part of that process. So it's a very interesting discussion.
Right, and I think this next one will be as well. How do you see the values around soil health informing the identification and development of health indicators and science to deliver on those?
So for me, that the values, is the intervention logic. You start with the values because that's what you want to achieve. And if you know what those values are, then you can work through that logical, through well, what's actually affecting those values, what tools do we have to address those values, and therefore what are the indicators that you need to put in place to show that those tools are affecting that threat, that affecting that value. So to me, what the values do is that's where you need to start, because if you start at the other end, at the indicators, then you're already restricting what you're looking at. I mean, it's in the wellbeing literature. Joseph Stiglitz is a Nobel laureate economist who does a lot of work on well-being, and what he talks about is that we only do what we measure. So the value, by articulating what those values are, to me that gives you the sort of the umbrella that you can then hang off those other questions, which then will drive what those indicators are, and it will help you with getting indicators that actually reflect what people value in soil.
Great answer, thanks Dean. Now there's a follow-up question and I'm not sure who wants to tackle this one, but I think it's of interest to lots of people. Can there be some metrics that change promptly rather than on the decadal cycles so that farmers and growers can recognise changes and adopt those changes in a quicker time frame?
I'll start out on that one. Yeah, again, I think so. That's the whole idea behind dynamic soil processes or properties. And again, soil carbon would probably be at the slower end of that cycling. So, and again, that's what makes carbon monitoring a little bit difficult. But yeah, again, things like some of the biological indicators in particular, unfortunately, while we are making strides in that area, and there have been a lot of strides internationally, we're still not quite there on the biological indicators. But yeah, I would say, again, there are some chemical indicators that change fairly rapidly, but the biological indicators will probably be the one thing where I could see that really being a good measure of that shorter temporal changes.
Dean, do you want to add anything to that one?
I think some of the social and cultural potential values which would lead to some of those indicators, yeah, some of those could potentially have shorter temporal turnarounds as well. But yeah, that's partly what those are the sorts of things that need to, because we don't really have a good handle on what those values and social and cultural values are. We've only just starting to pull those together, particularly for New Zealand, and even globally, they're not really well understood. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they go and what comes out of that. But this is the conversation that we started and which we're looking to continue.
Great. I just want to take us a different tack here. We've got some questions around soil contamination. So maybe just start with what indicators do you suggest around soil contamination?
Again, there's typically trace elements are often measured. Most councils for state of the environment reporting now measure a suite of trace elements. Some of the organic contaminants are a little bit tougher because again, those can be very localized. But yes, there is some indicators or work in that area.
And to follow that up, have we consulted Māori on their views on contamination and contamination management?
I would say that again is part of their framework. If we go back to, I may butcher this a little bit, and I'm sure I won't get the nuance quite right, but Dean, can you go back to the slide of the book? The title of the book, Tamaki Oneone Huda Patakuri, actually, as Garth has explained to me, Patakuri actually, Pata is contaminants and Kuri means to remove or make healthy. Again, I probably butchered that and didn't get quite the nuances right. But yeah, again, so a lot of that perspective is making the soil healthy through removing contaminants or unhealthful aspects of it.
Great, thank you. And I think we'll try and schedule a follow-up webinar to cover some of the contents of the book there. Two last questions. From a perspective of well-being, is the living biology of the soil of core importance? And if so, how is that demonstrated beyond bacteria?
So I would say yes. And again, it becomes back to the values and the values that that various stakeholders or actors hold with regards to soil. I mean, as far as Bryan pointed out, so from a Māori perspective, they see themselves, you know, the environment and Māori, you know, is sort of interconnected. People are interconnected. I think different stakeholders will have different values, and a lot of those values will include more than just the bacterial side of things. So it really comes back to that. You need to actually understand what those values are. And for some, it might just be the bacterial content of the soil. For others, it'll be the more of the wider ecosystem aspects of soil. And by understanding that, then you can have those conversations around, well, how do we manage that? And that'll come back to those indicators. So, I mean, so generally, yes. And I think it fits well within the wellbeing approach, because you start having those conversations around all those different aspects, and that's where you start the conversation, and that then brings in those different competing views, and then that's where you start talking about, well, what are the trade-offs?
And I would just add again that again, part of the problem with the biological indicators is trying to determine what levels are necessarily good versus bad. So again, it's a difficult area to get those indicators right.
Thanks, team. And there's one last question, and I'm going to answer it. I never get to answer a question, but we've been asked if there is a single place that will pull together all the bits of research that that has been done in this program. And I want to say yes, and in the follow-up email that you will get after this webinar, there is a link to a web page where you will find much of the material that we've been talking about, and links to some of the publications as well. So rest assured, there is plenty of places that you can go back to and find out more about this work. So it's time for us to wrap up. Thank you very much, Bryan and Dean, and thank you all for joining us. We'll be back again in November with another exciting webinar for you. Thanks, and bye for now from all of us.
Good, thank you.
Thanks, bye.